So, sir, how has the journey been so far?
Quite
The
interesting.
lockdown journey. Lockdown journey, I
I,
should specify.
I I think being having my own independent house made the journey a bit comfortable, very comfortable. So
Okay.
we had a privileged view, I would say,
So you're
but
based in
gave
Delhi
me
only,
plenty
sir?
of opportunity. Yeah, I can hear you.
No, you're based in Delhi only.
No, I'm currently in Hyderabad.
Oh, okay. So the weather must be a issue there.
It's quite pleasant right now.
Hyderabad.
It's been raining for last 2 3 days. Yeah,
Oh,
it's been
okay.
raining for
Because
last two three
normally
days. So,
Hyderabad, the weather can be a bit brutal during summers. A lot of dry
yeah, but
heat.
this year, absolutely, absolutely. This year, it has been, the weather has been kind, I would say.
Only the weather has been kind. The rest have been really
Yeah.
bad. So
Yes.
yeah, yes, sir. Uh, so uh, thank you so very much for accepting our invite. And it's not just a privilege, but it's an honor to have you explain a little to people who really don't know what the matter is all about. Uh, we keep talking about the India-China standoff. We keep talking about tensions at the border, but trust me, we we do realize that nearly 95% of the population really don't know, uh, what Indian borders are all about and what kind of hardships our defense personnel go through in safeguarding not just our borders, but also providing the safety and security for us to have a good night's sleep. Uh, we're really privileged to have you because not just as someone who has been there, done that, had the experience of life, but someone who started with
Thank you.
the infantry and has spent 3 decades. 3 decades is a long, long, long time in service of the nation, and you've had a very distinguished career, starting from infantry to uh, you know knowing
It's
firsthand each and
it's
every inch of the border. You have traveled the jungles, the mountains, the deserts, and the riverine plains. You
yeah.
probably have much more knowledge than uh, the people who keep screaming out from television screens, claiming to be experts on the border issue. So the entire idea from Indoi Analytics was that let's try and educate people on what the issue is all about. Solutions will come. We will have discussions. We will have solutions. We will have very divergent views. But the basic thing which we lack is knowledge. Uh, I do not comment on issues which I know nothing about. Unfortunately, with social media, uh, we kind of take it to another level. Uh, what exactly is the history of the Indochina situation which is prevalent as on date? There has to be an history. Uh, the
The
beginning of
the
the
po-
issue.
the you see the thing that we have to understand is that uh, what is happening with reference to what is happening at the moment in Ladakh, that is Pangong Tso, Galwan, all these have become now DBO, these have become household names. These are episodes in a larger event that is taking place. You see, this is a very small event, very small episode in a larger event that is taking place. Uh, the event is two-dimensional. One is India-China dimension, and one is the China versus the world dimension. So that is the perspective that we have to first understand. uh, it's very it's not a push button thing that you something happened and you push a button and you have a solution to that. It's not, there are no algorithms, there are no templates where you look, anything you face, you have a checklist, you go through the checklist and you find a solution. No. These are life situations, these are difficult situations, and each situation is very different, very unique from any previous situation. But what is constant is the dynamics of a larger event. And here I would like to dwell on the dynamics of India and China relations, and then little bit of what the international dynamics are there. China has historically followed, and this is people have to understand this, that China has historically followed a very simple policy. At if you strip it of all its jingoism and all its ideological leanings, they aim to dominate the world. They will use everything in the book to buy time, strengthen where they are, and they have whatever today everybody sees that this is what madness is, this China is angering everyone. But no, they have over the years, they have reached today at a place where they feel that they can dictate to the world. How this has happened, with reference to what has happened in Ladakh, there was in 1986-87, there was an episode on the Somdramchu in Arunachal. I'll take that as a reference point. We surprised them. We airlifted our forces, heli-dropped them in place where the Chinese did not expect them. So the Chinese then went back to the drawing board, and they, from 89, when late Mr. Rajiv Gandhi went to China, then late P.V. Narasimha Rao ji went, and 1993 they signed a first peace and tranquility agreement. Thereafter, we have signed 5 more protocols and agreements defining our conduct along the LAC. All this was to buy time. Two things. One is debt diplomacy. The second is the BRI initiative. Now, China has historically exploited the rule-based system of the world, be it in diplomacy, be it in economics, be it in any sphere, to its own advantage. They took advantage of the rule-based system, but when it came to their side of implementing the rule-based system, they said they refused to do it. The South China Sea is the classic example, where an international tribunal gave a judgment against them, but they refused to honor that judgment. So this is how China works. They exploited World Trade Organization rules to enrich themselves and make economic inroads into all the countries of the world. Today, most people would be surprised to know that 80% of the fashion industry in Italy is owned by Chinese. Major publications, major publication house, which are opinion makers and opinion generators, are Chinese owned. So this is something that we have to understand about the Chinese conduct, that democracies follow basic principle of collaboration and coexistence. Understand this difference. All democracies, all open societies follow the system of collaboration and coexistence. If we have differences, we sit down on the table and we find lasting solutions to them. The China, as a totalitarian society, especially since late 69, when Deng Xiaoping got into close talks with Richard Nixon and the free world, and they did all of everything that flowed from that. China has, they have concealed their real intentions. They, they, they have set up stage for confrontation, coercion, and then expansion. Okay. Conflict is not there. What we see as conflict is actually not conflict, it's coercion. Now, with this as a background, we relate to what is happening in Ladakh. Over last 4-5 years, a few episodes have happened. The episodes where China got hurt maximum was India's refusal to participate in the BRICS scheme of things. And when the India said that we will not participate in BRI, because we gave two reasons for that. Number one of the BRI projects was passing through the Pakistani illegally occupied territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The second was that the financing structure of that was opaque. So India said that unless there is clarity on these two issues, we will not participate in BRI. Now, that was a big setback to China. There was a conference held in China. India was invited there, but India said that we have these two concerns and we will not participate. That was first time China felt that India is now becoming a challenger. RCEP, because RCEP would have opened floodgates for dumping. Okay. Now, these were things. Then what happened was that when COVID happened in December last year, there was a phenomenal anti-China, never before historically, a phenomenal anti-China sentiment throughout the world. Now, China had to, combat this. Now, what was happening was that how these things differed. Now, at one stage, China, whenever it sent out any PPE kits or any medical assistance, or they even threatened the countries that if you don't cooperate with us, we'll not give you medicines. Whereas India immediately, without any country that approached India, I think 30-40 odd countries we've sent medicines and PPE kit, ventilators we have sent. So, and we have now acquired a capacity where we are producing PPE sufficient quantity to supply to the world. So this was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was that in the post-COVID world, there was a large chorus of countries that why should we be dependent on one country, because that creates a disruption in economic cycle.
Yes.
The 70-day lockdown in China severely disrupted the logistic chain of the world.
Yes.
Now, so the world, it was started off by Japan. Japan said that we will incentivize companies moving their production out of China. Which are the countries who would benefit from that? Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, and Thailand. So these are the countries which would have benefited from this, which are in any case going to benefit from it. Because now most of the businesses have realized that they have to have diverse sources of manufacturing and this thing.
Supply.
So they will come to that. So India came. Now why China has taken this pinprick at Ladakh? They realize that in Arunachal we are very strong, and they don't have a little fact that may explain why China is so interested in Arunachal. Tawang in Arunachal is the birthplace of Dalai Lama, and Dalai Lama is a thorn in the Chinese side. Now, when they talk of Tibetan Autonomous Region, You see, there is a method in it. When they talk of Tibetan autonomous region, if they talk without Tawang, then it doesn't work out for them. So that's why they claim Tawang as a part of Tibetan autonomous region. But leave that little bit apart. They tried something in Doklam, they failed badly. Okay. They tried something in Nakula, they could not progress beyond a point. So what they did was they moved in their PLA. Now you have to understand that in Ladakh, the border management by China was by what they call they've got the BDR, the Border Defense Regiments.
Yes.
So the border defense regiments were beefed up by PLA troops brought in from Xinjiang province. Okay. Now that they decide, and why I am saying this is that people say that local level may be adventurism. No. After 2018, Xi Jinping is holding both office of the President of China and Chairman of Central Military Commission.
Yes.
In May, they moved a senior general from CMC to oversee both the theatre commands which have got borders with India. So that means that all these actions were being supervised and choreographed at the highest level. So this then came, now we come to this, Ladakh standoff per se. Ladakh has, there are a lot of theories going around. The ground fact that has rattled China maximum is the speed with which we completed the road, and as of yesterday we have even completed the bridge to which they were objecting vehemently.
Yes. Yes.
In Galwan.
So is it operational? Is the bridge operational?
Yeah, the bridge, yesterday the bridge has been completed. The completion of a bridge means that, it has been, all the piers have been laid, the trestles have been laid, the approach roads have been built, the embankments have been put in place. So when you say that a bridge is complete, it means it's ready to use. So that has happened. Now, coming back to our system, what is that is the first thing that happened. Now, we have to understand, there's a paper that was written on China's water problems. China has starved Mekong River in Southeast Asia of water, because of which now reverse salinity is taking place in the interior regions. China needs water very badly. They are damming Brahmaputra to divert water to their plains and central China. In Pak-occupied Kashmir, China has built 5 dams. Yes. And word is that some of that water is going to be diverted to Xinjiang province, especially Kashgar area, where they have set up the largest polysilicon plant to manufacture chips. This plant has come up in last 2 years after they started facing resistance from Donald Trump on export of high-end chips.
Yes.
And they've set it up in Kashgar because raw material is easily available. But this requires phenomenal quantity of water, fresh water. It's like, in India, we have sugarcane factories which require a lot of water. Similarly, yes. Here, this plant will require a lot of water. So we've been hearing that there's some move to take the water from Pak-occupied Kashmir, that the dams that are there, and pipe it down to that. That's just one of those things, articles that I came about in last 5-6 days.
Okay.
Then the second thing is that China has, people are confusing the purpose of CPAC. The purpose of CPAC is that China wanted an alternate route to supply its western provinces, that is Xinjiang, Manchuria, Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, this side. And because ferrying it across the China, the products are going from all the way from across by sea, and then from the eastern seaboard to western parts of China, it's not quite economical. If they have a land route from say Gwadar to Kashgar, and along the old Karakoram highway, they have a CPAC
Yeah.
road link and a rail link. This is much shorter. So they would then be able to supply food, oil, products into the into western China, provinces of China, and export the same via this route to other parts of the world. They've already laid a rail line from Xinjiang to Europe, which they are running. It takes, I think, 12 or 17 days to complete the journey. So, so this was what was happening. Now, when we do this, we have cut in the previously before this road came up. The troops used to go to a place called Sasoma. Sasoma is about 12 to 14 hours drive from Leh. You cross over Khardungla, come down, go to Sasoma. From Sasoma at a base. From Sasoma, it was 4 to 5 days walk to reach the SSN, what we used to call the subsector north. Now,
Okay.
and it was air maintained. So now with this road, now we have cut down the journey to 12 hours. That is, you start from Leh and in 12 hours you are in the DBO plateau and the Depsang plains and the DBO plateau. Now what happens there is that that has unnerved China, because if you put a brigade size force in that area or you raise a higher level force, it is very easy for India now in a time frame to assemble a force for offensive design. Okay. And China does not want any offensive design that is threatening either Kashgar or the Karakoram highway. So this was one of the things. Secondly, the problem on the Chinese side is that the Chinese ability to mass troops is limited. You see, they have if you look at the whole of Tibet, as per what are the military analysis of the various think tanks in the world, China has 40,000 regular troops. I'm not talking of their the border defense regiments. I'm only talking
Yeah.
of the regular PLA.
Correct.
So they have about 40,000 troops. 40,000 troops means very loosely about three and a half or 4 divisions of forces. Now
Okay.
to have any major offensive against India in any sector, they have to have, say, if you look at only Ladakh sector, they have to assemble a force of the size of at least 4 to 6 divisions. Okay. In addition to that, they will have to have a force of at least another 4 to 8 divisions along the central and the eastern flanks to take care of any response that may come from that sector. Now, the strength of Chinese army is 25 infantry divisions, about 14 of their various groupings. They have got the armored formations, and about 8 artillery divisions, bulk of which would be faced towards Taiwan. So they
Yeah,
will not
because that's
dilute
the North
that.
Center.
They will not dilute what is on the Vietnamese and South China Sea portion. So now they do not have. So they do not, first. So this is a fact that other than using heavy artillery or missiles, they do not have the ability to inflict any or mount any major military operation against India. This pinpricking will go, but what has happened in this Galwan episode is that all previous protocols have been torn up. China in one go cannot now say that let us go back to the protocols we were before, because that trust is broken. You see, you are bringing in the biggest evidence of that break of trust is China brought in iron rods with nails welded on them.
Yes.
That is a deliberate act of violence.
That's barbaric, actually.
So that is how now we have to look at this picture. And that is why I'm saying that if China has done it deliberately, what did they want to do? Why did they do it? Their intention was messaging to three people. One set of people is the government of India. Second set of people is the Southeast Asian countries, and third is the world. The message to the world and the Southeast Asian countries is that look, India is a nuclear power, India is a big country, and still we are not hesitating to take action against India.
Yeah.
Okay. The message to India is that if you are not sensitive to our concerns, we will heat up the temperature all along the LAC wherever we want. They tried it in before it happened in Ladakh. They tried it in Nakula in Sikkim.
Yes. Yes.
And they will try something. They have been, they may try. It is, you never know what is going on in their mind, but they may try something in Arunachal also. So now apart from this, what has happened is that China has now advanced their claim. They say the whole of Galwan is ours. You see, which was never said before. Now China is officially saying that whole of Galwan is ours. So they have altered the nature of dispute. Previously, the nature of dispute was demarcation of LAC. Now they have altered that from demarcation of, yes. So they have demarcated it from a demarcation of LAC. They have changed it to claim, laying claims and territorial claims. So now essentially they have got two territorial claims. One is in Arunachal, they claim whole of Arunachal. And now second in Ladakh, they have advanced their territorial claim up to Galwan. Now this indicates, you see, all these are, this indicates that now they are threatening us that we will take military action to occupy Galwan. This is what their whole thing was. Now, there are various people who are finding various excuses for it. They're trying to justify how China is feeling. China is not interested in any, cooperation or collaboration. They want to dominate you. They want to coerce you, and they will use everything in the book, every method to do that.
They will use now everything even outside the book, not necessarily just in the book.
Yeah.
They rewrite books.
They rewrite books. Now they have so that is also a message to the international investors. The threat of war drives away investors. We saw that what happened in Kargil. Kargil was a limited war, but investors almost fled from India. Okay. Yes.
The uncertainty doesn't go well with business.
Yeah. Now, another thing that is happening with you see, China mein, economically, what has happened is that there is this I tweeted also some time back, that there is an exodus of wealth taking place post Hong Kong. When China brought in the Hong Kong security law and became very aggressive against Taiwan, the wealth started fleeing from China. Some reports say that as many as 15,000 Chinese millionaires or billionaires have left China. They have left Hong Kong. Okay. They say that nearly 450,000 companies have permanently shut down.
Yes.
Okay. They say that around, again, this was a report which I saw, that around 25,000 foreign companies have not applied for renewal of license. Okay.
Yes. In Hong Kong, yes.
Where will all this money go? You have to understand. I'll give you an example of Jack Ma. Jack Ma was formerly boss of Alibaba.
Yeah.
He's now resigned. He's now handed over. There's a panel of 6 people who are running Alibaba. Effectively, those 6 people are members of Communist Party of China. They're fronting for them. Jack Ma was forced to resign. Jack Ma is not allowed to travel abroad. Okay. Which means that why all these things happen? Because the totalitarian regime functions on one person, and that is Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
You know? Now, this is the environment that is happening in the world. A manufacturing shifts to India, Vietnam, Thailand. You see how they're systematically bullying them. They've laid claims to a Philippines island. With
Yes.
Japan, Senkaku Island, they are raising the temperatures. There was a Malaysian drilling rig which was drilling oil there. They went and they started harassing them. Their coast guard ships, they rammed into Indonesian fishing boats and threw the fishermen
Yes.
abroad
Yeah, the
overboard,
trawlers, yes.
saying ke, yeah. So not only that, they threw the fishermen into sea, killed them and threw them into sea, saying
Yes.
ke they died and we
Yes.
have buried them at sea.
Yes.
So with every country, with Vietnam, Vietnamese fishing trawlers, they are having problems. So they are being bullish. Now what are China's weak points? The biggest weak point of China today is there are twofold. One is their demographics. Their population is aging very, very fast.
Yes.
A study that was carried out in 2014-2016 had said that by 2030, 50% of their population would be over the age of 55/60.
More
Now,
than
as the
60%
pop,
actually.
yeah. So what happens is that as the population ages, your efficiency, work efficiency goes down.
Yes.
The young
Yes.
blood
Your productivity
required to
levels come
keep,
down drastically.
yeah, and the ratio of working to retired people goes very adverse. So
Yes. It'll be
that
from
is,
1:2.
yeah. So now what happens is that when that happens, then Chinese, the burden mounts, the medical burden, the social security burden.
Yes.
And another aspect of this is that the same study says that by 2030, there will be 20 million Chinese males who will not have brides.
Yes.
Just last week, there was a paper written in China that officially some sociologist has written that Chinese government should allow Chinese women to marry two husbands. Then that it is the situation is getting that severe. So that is one problem. The second problem of China is food security. In 2018, there were some reasons when India said they imported emergency import of rice, non-basmati rice was done by China because
Rice
they
and
ran into
soya.
a food problem. Yeah,
And soya.
rice and soya both were lifted.
Yes.
The now so that is second. Now what has China done? I do not know how and at what level it is happening, but they are literally banning themselves into food scarcity. They put bans on Australia, which was their primary source of grain and milk. They have banned pork from India. They have banned, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, they have banned some meat or mutton or something from some European country. So they are literally banning themselves into a food scarcity. So this is what.
Sorry, sir. Sorry. Terribly sorry.
Yeah. So these are the two biggest Achilles heels of China. Now, what are our options as a country, India? We have demonstrated and we have shown to not only to the world but also to China that on the border we will match you for what you're doing. We are mirroring you. With that mirror deployment, and we will not allow you to do mischief. That's the first thing. Second thing we have told China is that there now everything, I do not know what is happening in diplomatic circles, but what word is coming out is that we have in very strong terms told China that there is no before this. There is no, you have to go back and you have to either you go back or there is no further negotiations on the essential. The restoration of status quo now is an essential precondition for any talks.
Yes. There is no status quo ante now. It is status quo.
Yeah.
You have to go back to status quo ante actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one point I would like to make here is most people are asking ki, when the Prime Minister said yesterday that there is no encroachment into Indian territory. Now, again, it is not party politics, these things happen over a period of time for whatever reasons at that moment, whoever was drafting these agreements, all along India-China border, we have created pockets of grey territory. By saying, okay, your claim line, my claim line, and the area between that. Now, that is an opaque arrangement. And that opaque arrangement is what is being exploited by China today. We say that this is our claim line, they say no, this is our claim line, and that area in between that, which we said that we will only dominate by patrolling, we will not build any permanent structures. China has violated that, and they are going into those opaque areas. So that is first thing. Second thing is that the point that none of our forward outposts have been, pushed back. Our forward outposts are in position, they're in locations where they were.
We've stood our ground.
So that yes, we are standing our ground. Now, again, there are everybody have their own perceptions and their own thought processes. My thought process and my perception is that Government of India is doing a very good job of being resolute on the border and reasonable on talks. We will talk reasonably, but on the border we will give it to you, nice and proper. And the rules of engagement have also now changed because China itself has torn up everything. So the rules of engagement have also changed. I will not specify those because they are for the people concerned. They will handle it. Second thing that we have to do is we have to now the bottom line in everything else is that India has to have a robust economy, and we have to, whatever we do, all our food economy is, I think, probably at its best at any time of our history. We have enough grains to feed Indians for next 18 months now, as per the previous
close to 2 years. Yes, close to 2 years.
Yeah. So we have to now, really develop our economy, and it will be the strength of our economy that will see us through. We have to create an environment to attract foreign investment. We have to create an environment where jobs are created for the youth. We have to start exporting also, and that will only happen when we structure ourselves as per the international requirements. While doing this, we have to one caveat that I would like to add here is that while doing this, we should not fall into the trap of Europe and America, that bulk of our manufacturing companies or our businesses become Chinese owned, because they tried that. Now we have put in place a mechanism where we don't allow change of ownership, but we should be very careful with whatever money is coming. The source of money has to be such that there is no change in the ownerships. That point has to be very clear. Now the Chinese companies have gone into an overdrive, especially the mobile companies.
Yes.
They have started using a term manufactured in PRC or assembled in India. Now, day before yesterday, I was reading, there was an article that said that the Chinese mobile manufacturers are planning to localize up to 70%. Up to 70% localization is very good, but manufacturing in India is very good. Critical portions of our infrastructure, we have to we read reports that the rail ministry has cancelled a project. We have heard reports that the telecom ministry is relooking at everything sourcing from China.
They're revisiting the agreement. They're revisiting the agreement.
going to be the next thing, that's business. And we have to, set up. I do not know how the government will work it out, but my personal this thing is that the government should set up data, farms in India under the management of NIC, National Informatics Center. They have the skill, they have the capability, and lease out space to the companies. And there should be, this is a suggestion that I made elsewhere also, there should be a trace tax. A trace tax means that as low as 1 paisa per gigabyte or per whatever quantum of data, but it has to be paid if any data is transferred from India to anywhere outside India, so that we have a trace that, okay, this data of this so-and-so company went to so-and-so company abroad. You see, there has to be a trace tax, and we have to...
Basically, there has to be, because when it comes to documentation, there's a paper trail. When it comes to data, there has to be a data trail.
Yeah. So this is the thing. Now, as far as come to the military aspects. So that is the larger picture. What coming to the if you see what happens is that due to lack of oxygen, there are 3-4 things that happen. Your lungs expand to take in additional air. That air, when you breathe in, there is less oxygen, so it's a natural reflex that the air sacs expand. When the air sacs expand, they become permeable and the fluids from the body enter the lung, and they call a condition called pulmonary edema, or water in the lungs. This is a high altitude impact if your body is not properly acclimatized. The second thing that happens is hypoxia causes a bit of disorientation. The low oxygen to supply to the brain, it causes
you become delirious, kind of.
Yeah, the extreme cold is such, in places where if you touch your with your skin, you touch any metal surface or any other surface, you immediately get a frostbite or a chilblain there, so which is again counted as a cold injury. You don't feel, because of all of this, you don't feel like eating. Loss of appetite is a major issue. Loss of appetite leads to hyperacidity, and then it leads to ulcers. The lack of oxygen, again, the lack of oxygen content, your blood pressure rises. Now, if you serve for 2 years in that place and you come back, the blood pressure in most people comes down to normal. But in many people, it does not come down to normal, and the high blood pressure becomes a body normal. Now, people call it lifestyle disease. It's not lifestyle disease. It's a condition that has arisen out of service in a difficult area. So these are, like there is no water there. Not everybody is sitting close to either Indus River or to Pangong Tso. So you have to melt ice. So you have to melt ice.
Yes, you melt ice, make tea.
So to melt ice, you require kerosene oil.
Yes.
Now,
that's toxic.
The physical that's toxic, and what happens is that when all this has to be ferried to heights. So when it is ferried to heights, the individuals, due to the high altitude impact, the individuals' capacities are reduced almost 50%. So a person who could carry 20 kgs will carry only 10 kgs. Now the commanders are always calculating I have to send ammunition, I have to send oil, I have to send ration, I have to send medical stuff.
They have to prioritize.
Yeah. So that takes up, that's quite a thing, It sounds very easy, that you can get up and do things on the plains. In the plains, you can do things. You're physically fit. Any physically fit person would be able to do many things. There, it is not possible to do all those things that easily. Even the equipment, the attrition on the equipment is heavy. I'll give you one example. The firing pin of a weapon. It's a very critical piece of equipment. When it is not being fired, it is at sub-zero temperature. When you fire it, the temperature shoots up to many times, 100 times more than that. Now, this temperature variation, rapid temperature variation over a cycle, makes the metal brittle. It breaks off. You have your engines there, you have generators, you have all these things. The cooling systems, when they are not running, you are required to drain them, because otherwise the coolant or the water will freeze inside. Of course, now with new technology, I'm talking of back, but now I have heard that they've got these anti-freeze mixtures and anti-freeze coolants which don't freeze.
You have antifreeze petrol, diesel, antifreeze petroleum products are available.
But again, the efficiency goes down because at the end of the day, it's a combustion engine. The aircraft, if you read, there was an article about the landing of AN-32, first landing of AN-32 at DBO, Old Daulat Beg Airfield. The pilot was, the efficiency levels are so low. When he took off, when he narrated that, the differences are there. So all these things, when we say everything is degraded, the performance of humans and machine at those altitudes is degraded. And in those conditions, our boys at Galwan, if they fought hand-to-hand combat for 3 to 4 hours, man, I got to give it to them. Yeah, they did it. And there's only one thing that pushed them through. That was the Paltan Ka Izzat.
Yes.
Okay, moment the CEO was there, it was Paltan Ka Izzat online, and for next 4 hours, I think the Chinese would have never faced anything so violent in their lives.
I have a very broad smile on my face when you say that, but very honestly, I should be having tears of blood, because from whatever you just described, it's actually inhuman conditions under which our soldiers are protecting our borders, and they have to come up against not just nature, because their enemy number one is nature, and there you can't fight it. You really can't fight nature. And then comes the enemies of the nation, whom because of your fight with nature, your strength is depleted by more than 50-60%. So you're only 40% of what you are actually. And with 40% capacity or capabilities, if you're standing up, hats off to them. Really, hats off to them. Your chest swells with pride, but your chest swells with pride, but you really have tears of blood.
Our Border Roads Organization is one agency that has been doing phenomenal work at those heights.
Absolutely.
You can't even have a. I will give you an example. Just try to imagine that in sub-zero temperature, you are mixing cement with water for making of a wall. You just imagine. The moment you pour that boiling hot water into cement, it freezes.
Yes.
Just look at the logistical night. I'm giving a very simple day-to-day problem, because
it's a very practical. It's something which is done on a daily basis. Only thing is, it's inexplicable, because how are they managing it?
You're when you are on the planes, you can easily, 2 guys or 3 guys can easily lift 100 or 150 kg metal trestle of a bridge. But at that height, it would take at least 6 to 7 people to lift that trestle, because your efficiency, body efficiency goes down. That's natural. These are in these conditions. I would hats off to General Harpal and his team. They have done phenomenal work on this infrastructure development, including the one that is now on the tri-junction of India, Nepal and Tibet. That is now China, now Nepal is claiming. But this, this all goes to show one thing only, and that is that the human spirit. Those boys who are doing it there, they are doing it for the country. They're doing it for their unit. And when they come home, I mean, this is all those people who are watching, be more forgiving to the soldier. When he comes down from an area where there's hypoxia, his reflexes, his instincts are different. He is he spent 6 months, 4 months in isolation, no communication, no entertainment. Okay, today everybody has entertainment on mobile. They don't have. It's not there.
Yes.
In imagine, I'll give you one exercise that anybody who wants to try it, go to the top of the roof or terrace of your building at midnight from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Shut off everything, no lights. Imagine the pressure. You are straining your ears to pick up when you're on sentry duty.
Yes.
You're straining your ears to pick up unnatural sounds. You are straining your eyes to pick up, movements, and do that for 2 hours continuously in that high altitude is not an easy job. You try, anybody who wants to feel what it feels, go to a place where there's no light at night, 1 to 3, 2 hours, just sit and try this. How much can you listen and how much can you see? And that is when there is no threat of death. Here there's a pressure on the mind that if this sentry slips up, only he who goes. It's his counted, his brother soldiers who are sleeping because they know that this man is away. So those pressures, when they play on the human mind, it does become a little erratic. That's why they become short-tempered. That's why they slightly become aggressive. Be forgiving. That's it.
So I will not say be forgiving. I'll say respect what they are doing for us.